Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. I'm here as always with my good friend Dan Wiseman. Words that I've not echoed for quite some time, but Dan, I'm buzzing to be back, mate. We've just finished, I was going to say watching, but we were sort of really torturing ourselves with Scotland versus England, weren't we? And the international break is sort of wrapping up now. Club football is back this weekend. We've got Aston Villa versus Crystal Palace to discuss. But we thought we'd do a little mini roundup and a catch up as well because we haven't spoke for a little while. So how you doing, mate?
I'm very good, mate. I'm very good indeed. It feels like absolutely ages, doesn't it? Absolutely ages. And yeah, I know that international break definitely divides opinion. There are sick and twisted individuals in the world like myself that quite enjoy international breaks. I'm a big aficionado of international football generally. But I think as international breaks go, this one's been quite fun. I think the problem is with international breaks I often have is that I think people kind of get sucked up into this England vacuum where I think I think if you do open your eyes and look generally across European qualifying, there's so many fun storylines. Like Scotland obviously didn't have a great night tonight, but they're top of their qualifying group ahead of Spain and Norway, Georgia, and I know that sounds crazy with Georgia, but they've got some very good players now coming through. You've got Italy's struggles, and it looks like Zaniolo started for them tonight, and it looks like they're currently on the right side of a very important result. Yeah, full-time whistle's just gone, winning against Ukraine, and if they lost that game, it was really looking like they were in this up shit's creek without a paddle, to be honest with you. So there's loads of different individual fun storylines that happen across the continent and across the world generally. But yeah, I feel that England naturally just kind of swallows everybody up. And it's a shame that we sit here and none of the Villa boys were involved, really, to be honest with you, mate. Not for England anyway, but, Booba's been on the bench today in France's game against Germany. Zaniolo started against Ukraine, as I said. Emi Martinez, you just pointed out before we came on air, he's currently at La Paz, which is crazy altitude, right at the top of Bolivia. So I'm quite happy that he's only a goalkeeper, to be honest with you, and won't have to do too much cardio in that one. Pau Torres on the bench as Spain took on Cyprus. Robin Olsen's probably one of the better villains on the international scene. He's had a good old time in goal for Sweden. Started both of their games. Started tonight as well as we record. A lot of and obviously Guinea we saw play against England, mate. So around the houses, there's been a lot of villains involved in international football.
Yeah, it's good. It's good that players are like Olsen. I mean, it looks like Sweden did lose 3-1 today, but obviously kept a clean sheet against Estonia in their qualifying game earlier on in the break, and it's good for him because I know he's obviously had a couple of 90 minutes in the tank at club level for us recently, but to keep him sort of fit and obviously being Sweden's number one, good to see him play. Guinea as well got himself an assist the other night in when McTominay got a brace as well, didn't he? Very weird. It's just Scotland. They just they get the best. Steve Clarke's system, you have to give it him. He gets 100%. So much out of Guinea. He gets so much out of McTominay. There's talk of Harvey Barnes even switching allegiances, and I don't necessarily know how that'd work out with the fact they don't really play with wingers because they've got 57 good left backs apparently that they try and shoot on in the team. But no, it's good. If I'm being honest though, mate, the amount of times we've sat on here and complained about England, I'm not going to do that because it's redundant. There's no point. But I'm almost glad that Ollie wasn't really involved because I mean, look at the games that we've played and how many minutes Kane's got as well, and he obviously scored a good goal in this game. Phenomenal assist by Jude Bellingham. Said with a slight bit of pain, but man, the boy's generational. You can't hate him. You just can't hate him. And yeah, I look at our players, and I think the only player that I'm probably aggrieved at not going, and it's more on the player's behalf, is Dougie, because I think that will become a point of contention at some time. He's signed a contract, he's stayed, he obviously believes in the project, but he will see that Bruno Guimaraes, Joelinton, Casemiro, guys like that, who are all playing in the same or a similar position, getting in ahead of him. Douglas Luiz is just as good, if not better, than all of the players that I've just listed there. And maybe it's just Brazil have absolutely sickening squad depth problem that Dougie will have to get over. But I can't help but maybe feel that there could be, and I don't want to cause any speculation or whatever, but it is just my opinion that there is an unscratched itch for Douglas Luiz when it comes to a future move in the summer, because Brazil, there's such you think of football, you think of Brazil, that it is everything to them. You cut them open, and they bleed football. So, and obviously, history was made the other day as well. Neymar overtook Pele as Brazil's all-time scorer. Dougie's going to be looking at that from the outside, thinking, man, that would have been really cool to have been with Neymar when he did that. And again, I don't mean to fearmonger or anything like that, but I can't help but feel that there will be a part of him that's looking in from the outside, thinking, when am I going to get my chance? Why aren't I getting my chance?
It's really interesting in that there sometimes seems to be such a bizarre kind of backlog that you sometimes get with the Seleção, and that players that you would think would have 10, 20 caps for Brazil, you'd look it up and they've only played once or twice or something like that. We had this international break with Gabriel, plays for Arsenal, and the amazing, what an 18 months he's had. He played in their 5-1 win over Bolivia, the game that you, as rightly saying, that saw Neymar become Brazil's outright top goal scorer. That was his first ever game for Brazil.
It's crazy, isn't it? One of the Premier League's best defenders.
100%. Over the last, and he's only just getting a look in. And Brazil are kind of in this really weird era in that I think the World Cup exit and the manner of it signaled a kind of changing of the guard. And I've kind of felt that whilst they kind of went into the World Cup as favourites, they've kind of been stuck between generations, in that the reason why Gabriel hasn't been playing is because it's been Thiago Silva and Marquinhos. And if it's not Marquinhos, it's Eder Militao. And that has been the running order. And as you rightly say, I think as long as Casemiro is playing football, that spot will be his in midfield. And obviously you've sort of seen Bruno Guimaraes come in alongside him. But the interesting thing is as well with the Seleção is that there's always 3 or 4 squad inclusions that come from the Primeira division and Brazil's domestic league. And I think that's right. And I think that's fair. And I think that it's a very good way of incentivizing players to stay in Brazil. So, because otherwise, I think if you only filled that squad with players that are playing overseas, as soon as players come of age, they just flock to Europe. So I think that's important, and there's plenty of those in there. You kind of see Lucas Perry and Nino and Andre. Andre is probably the spot in that squad that Douglas Luiz would be looking to take. But I do think it's good that they continue to give opportunities in the Seleção to players that are playing in the Primeira. But yeah, there's kind of all sorts of those different elements. And when you consider that, Wesley got game for Brazil when he was with us, Dougie obviously has a couple. But yeah, now that we're kind of in this next cycle of qualifiers and his performances are really starting to ramp up, you imagine that he's really going to be starting to bang on that door just to be in the squad. I mean, starting is completely different. You look at Bruno Guimaraes and Casemiro, and it's going to be difficult for him to edge his way in there. But yeah, I mean, with the Brazil squad, sometimes you just got to sit and say that just getting into the squad is an achievement with the depth of talent that they have.
Yeah, it's true. It's but when you put it like that, it's I'm sure Dougie's understanding as well. He'll know the situation. I'm sure the manager, who is the Brazil manager at the moment, obviously because they sacked the manager after the World Cup.
It's a caretaker manager. It's still, but obviously it looks like all the reports are saying it's Ancelotti.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. So I mean, that's something to consider as well. He'll obviously be very aware of the Brazilians in the European scene who are killing it. Quite a few of them at Madrid as well. Obviously, staples of that Real side. But yeah, I mean, in other news, mate, looks like Zaniolo had a good game against Ukraine. Beat them 2-1. In Euros qualifying, he actually played on the right wing, and I think that, the more we're seeing of Zaniolo, it's we're learning a lot about him, right? Because I haven't seen a whole bunch about him. Acutely aware of the kind of player he is, but obviously with the sort of injuries and going out to Turkey and that kind of thing, not seen too much of him recently. And I mentioned it on a podcast recently where Unai, sort of referred to him as a striker. And I mean, that label has almost lost all meaning these days, hasn't it? It's more like we talk about forwards now rather than strikers. There's not too many out and out strikers. When you talk strikers, you're talking your Haalands of the world now, your Harry Kanes, the old fashioned number 9s that are back in fashion. But Zaniolo actually played on the right wing, cutting in on his left, and he played 72 minutes in this game and looked relatively sharp, mate, from what reports are saying. And looking at the numbers right now, 86% pass accuracy, managed 70 touches, 2 key passes, and created 1 big chance, and managed to get a shot on target as well. This is all great. This is great. I mean, Italy, as you kind of alluded to at the top, mate, a little bit of a mess right now, aren't they? Their qualifying campaign isn't going as well as they would hope. It seems like they've just not been able to shake that World Cup curse. And I know it's from, God, when did they win it? 2006? But they've not. Yeah. Have they been to a World Cup since then? No, they're at 2014 because they were in a group with us, but they didn't go to 2018. They didn't go to 2022. Obviously, beat us in the Euros. But I mean, when Italy, footballing powerhouse, they should be at these big tournaments, man. And I mean, hopefully, Nicolo can help them get back on track. I'm just trying to pull up what the rest of their group looks like, because I mean, it's a group that should be winning.
But they're in trouble. Oh, they were in trouble. Obviously, they're in. We're top of that group with 13 points, and Italy are now second. But if Ukraine, obviously they drew the game before this win against Ukraine with North Macedonia, who have been like the scourge of Italy in recent years. Like you mentioned, they didn't get to Qatar for that World Cup, and it's because of a defeat on home soil against North Macedonia. I actually wrote a piece on Italy for a little while back, and it was really interesting to kind of look into like their setup and everything like that and how it goes. And obviously they're kind of in a new era with Luciano Spalletti at the helm, fresh off his title win with Napoli, and the lineup changed from that North Macedonia game into this game against Ukraine. There's like wholesale changes. The midfield is completely different, apart barring Nicolo Barella. So it's Barella, Cristante, Tonali in the 1-1 draw. They've switched it up with Fratesi and Locatelli. Zaniolo's coming on the right in place of Politano, which is interesting because Spalletti's really favoured that right-hand side of Politano and Di Lorenzo, which obviously was massive in that title win with Napoli. He's moved away from that to put Zaniolo in. Zaniolo got taken off for about 75 minutes, I think, but still played, as you rightly say, really well. And you kind of look at the commentary coming out of that game. I didn't watch it, but a lot of people are saying it was a much better performance from Italy, that they created a lot of chances. It was a bit more free-flowing, not as stodgy as it once against Macedonia. Fratesi actually scored 2 goals, which is pretty significant for them. Zaniolo kind of coming out as one of the players that played well, and there's, I imagine, a lot of eyes on Zaniolo in that team, considering the kind of moves that he's made to go away from Italy, made the quite unusual step to Galatasaray, but did well there, and obviously has now landed in the Premier League on loan. I imagine there's a lot of eyes on him when he comes back to play with the Azzurri, and seems like he's taken his chance quite well. And from what we've seen of him in a claret and blue shirt as well, he seems to be very hungry at the moment. Would you say, mate?
Yeah, definitely. And like again, to kind of come back to the Robin Olsen point, obviously Nicolo, it's circumstantial. He's only just come to the club, not had the opportunity to play in Conference League qualifiers due to playing with Galatasaray in the Champions League qualifiers. He's not had the minutes that you would have hoped from a new signing, especially when I think the position that he's coming in to take in the team, which is realistically the Leon Bailey or Moussa Diaby's position. Well, not Diaby, he's sort of got that nailed down, but that Bailey position is the one that is definitely sort of up for grabs and probably the weakest in the forward line for us. So it's good for Nicolo to get these kind of minutes under his belt. Great for confidence as well. I mean, I'm looking at that Italy team. It's quite tragic, really, isn't it? Like this we're talking about Italy, and I'm looking at this team, and I know Di Lorenzo, good player, Donnarumma, obviously fantastic goalkeeper. But I'm like, this was a footballing powerhouse, mate, and now they've got Newcastle and Aston Villa players in the squad. That's just where we're at, isn't it? Like, I mean, obviously Tonali's fantastic. He's had me eating my words from what I said in our season preview. But yeah, I mean, you don't look at this Italy side and think, man, like,
Yeah.
you don't feel them, do you? Like,
where are the vibes? Where are they? I need the
exactly.
vibes. This is totally vibeless Italy team. But it has been for a while. To be fair, like obviously the Euros win seems to be paper over the cracks because I loved what they did at the Euros, like the formation, the whole Mancini thing.
In the final.
Yes, apart that side. It was great. But yeah, you're right. There are no vibes whatsoever with this Italy team.
Yeah, it's just it's not right. And listen, like, I'm all for like new sort of nation, not new nations, they're not new, but you know what I mean. I'm all for the status quo changing. I'm all for North Macedonia pipping that second spot. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the group now that they're tied on points with Ukraine and North Macedonia, so it's very likely that they don't actually make it out of the group, which is pretty mad when you consider it. But yeah,
defending champions.
That's the thing. Is there a Euros curse as well?
Well, you have to look at it. It's like it's lucky that Germany are the hosts because,
oh God, yeah,
like had they been in qualifying, potentially they wouldn't be getting there either. So that's what I mean. I there are fun storylines in the international break, but I think most people in England just spend their time watching Gareth Southgate ball, which is no good for anyone really.
It's depressing. It's interesting you mentioned Germany though, mate, because obviously they sacked Hansi Flick after that big defeat to Japan. What a game that was, by the way. Just seems like Japan have really... That's the second time in about half a year. I mean, obviously they turned them over in the World Cup, didn't they? But at least Germany were ruthless about it. I mean, I don't think anyone's, like, Southgate is not going to get sacked. He will walk away after the Euros when his contract ends, and that will be that. But it's interesting to see the contrast because as well, like, I feel like all the teams we've actually spoke about, mate, are in between generations. Whereas this is us. This crop should be winning. Well, should have won the last Euros. Should have even arguably got to the final of the World Cup. This Euros and the next World Cup, like this squad is ready and is capable of winning tournaments, and we've got the perfect balance between the sort of the leaders of the team, your Kanes. I know Sterling isn't in there, but I imagine come Germany he will be back in that squad. Southgate does leave him out of these qualifiers quite often, and then puts him in his team. But you guys like Walker. And then, all the young players that we've got coming through right now, it feels like we've got that balance nailed down. So we should be competing and winning tournaments. Whereas, you look at Germany, like they've fallen off a cliff since 2014, really. I mean, their squad hasn't been brilliant since then. You could argue they probably should have done better in Russia. That was probably the last formidable German squad, but same with Italy, Brazil in between generations as well. It's there's no excuses for England really. I don't want to talk about England though. Let's talk about Villa, mate, because we've got a game to preview, and England is just depressing. But Crystal Palace, mate, they've looked all right this season, haven't they? Obviously, I think controversially kept Roy Hodgson, which. Sometimes you have to take a backward step to go forward, and I think he's definitely sort of made them look like a much steadier outfit. But they've actually been playing some really good football this season, and from the back end of last season, haven't they? And I think old Roy has sort of come out all guns blazing to sort of keep the critics quiet. But Palace look decent, and like defensively as well. They've been in games, like they've managed to stay relatively competitive in all of their games. There's a big win against Plymouth, I think it was in the cup. Was it in the cup?
Yeah.
That I'm looking at now. They managed to get that done. They've only lost by a goal to Arsenal. Again, like, I think that's pretty impressive. And going toe to toe with Brentford and leaving West London with a point is something that not many teams can actually do. So this is going to be. I mean, do you know what? We got some comments on the last preview we did where guys were like, someone was like, "You guys are so negative," and I'm like, "No, we're just cautiously optimistic." I think is probably the word, but it's, no game. There's no such thing as an easy game in the Premier League. But at home, finally a Saturday 3:00 kickoff. Not had one of them for God knows how long. But this will be tough, mate.
Yeah, it will. I'm quite I like Crystal Palace generally, to be honest with you. Like, they're a club that, like, I quite respect. I think it said I went to Selhurst Park once, although they lost. I just quite like Crystal Palace. Like, I like their fan base. I love the ground. I often like a lot of their players. Like, I always find that they're quite exciting to watch, and particularly, like, as I remember we spoke about, like, Crystal Palace Arsenal, I think, is the most Monday night football game I can think of. And I think it's a really cool place, like, under the lights. And I like this team. And I think Roy Hodgson's done a bloody good job. I think considering they the will he won't he saga that they had again, well, the last 2 summers with Zaha, and then this time it's like, is he going to re-sign? Is he not going to re-sign? And then he didn't. And then, like, how, like, this team was structured and how integral Wilfried Zaha was, to lose him and then not really miss a beat is quite impressive. And I know that they had Ebere Eze in the wings, and I know they had Michael Olise in the wings, but considering that there were points in the window, it looked like both of those guys could leave, like, feasibly. The fact that this ship has been steadied, and it's not because there's been a lot of transfer activity. What they have made is good signings, but there's only really 4. It's Jefferson Lerma, it's Rob Holding, Dean Henderson, and Mateus França from Flamengo in Brazil, which is, we've not really seen much of him yet. So it's not like, they've had a massive influx of players to kind of come in and revitalize this team. It's still very much the same team that we saw last season. And they've done pretty well. As you say, it's not been necessarily an easy start to the season for Palace. As you rightly say, like, Arsenal at home and Brentford away and Palace away on the first, Sheffield United away on the first game of the season, which I know, like, doesn't sound, but it's never easy going to a newly promoted team on the first day of the season. They got through just about against Wolves 3-2. That was their last game. But they come into a game where they typically don't do very well. And I have data to back that up. So Villa have lost just one of our last 11 Premier League home games against Crystal Palace. Winning 6, drawing 4. The last time we lost to them was all the way back in 2013. We lost 1-0 on a chilly December night. They've scored just 5 goals in those 11 away games against Villa. That's their lowest goal tally in an away game against any other side bar Tottenham. So against Villa, they average 0.45 goals per game away from home, and against Spurs, it's 0.36. So whilst we are not in necessarily a sort of great run of form, we're looking to avoid successive defeats, which is only happened twice under Emery. Like, the stats will tell you, maybe this is the best opposition that we could come up against, bar someone like Everton, who was our last home win.
I find against teams like Palace that are generally quite combative and will sort of relinquish possession, but then look to hit you on the counter-attack. A lot of wing play, as you alluded to with Olise and Eze. This is where Unai Emery thrives. He's the master at frustrating the frustrators. And that's what Roy Hodgson's Crystal Palace will want to come and do at Villa Park. They want to get under our skin. And we saw it, I think it was under Emery. I can't remember the timeline. It must have been, because it was the last game that we played against Crystal Palace at home. We beat them 1-0. Cheek Decore got sent off.
Mm-hmm.
That I mean, he should have gone way before. There was a number of bad tackles in that game that he made, but like Emery's got this knack of really being able to frustrate and almost bamboozle these teams, because I think they expect us to attack them with just as much sort of intensity and pace as they intend to hit us on the counter attack. And as we've seen under Emery at home, we'll have 60% of the possession and we'll play the game almost at a walking pace until we get to that final third. And I generally think that style is quite confusing, especially for, and I mean no disrespect, but for your teams like Crystal Palace, you're talking your sort of mid to lower table sides that have come with a game plan. When they aren't able to execute their game plan, that frustrates the hell out of them. And I mean, we saw that with the Decore sending off in the last game. So I'm going to be interested to see how this one goes. I think it's going to be relatively low scoring. I mean, the stats been going around Twitter, mate. Ollie Watkins has the highest amount of XG without goals this season. This is why you just shouldn't live and die by XG. And I've almost weaned myself off it. I used to love it. I'd mention it in every podcast. I still do think it's fantastic and can be insightful. But there's anyone who's played football, not even at a good level, will know you can miss an open goal because you were running too fast, or you took a little trip or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And that would be a very high XG chance, an open goal. But there's little things that obviously you can't account for necessarily. So there are holes. XG is like Swiss cheese. It's very nice, it's very tasty, but there's plenty of holes in it. It's by no means the perfect metric, and I don't think we should use it to beat Ollie Watkins with. That shouldn't be the stick that we hit him with. He scored a hat-trick, yes, against Hibs, but he's consistently hit triple figures. Fucking hell, no, he's not. He's hit double figures consistently 3 years in a row. That's where my triple came from. My brain went wandering. And each year we've seen an improvement on that number as well. So we have reason to believe and evidence that suggests that Ollie Watkins will score goals. And all you guys in FPL that are taking him out, man, just keep doing it. He's going to be my differential. He's not coming out on my team. He will score goals. He'll come good. I know he's good for 15 goals. I'm hoping that this is the game where he breaks duck. He looked really relieved, didn't he, mate, against Hibs, obviously, when he was scoring all them goals. And I think he looked visibly annoyed, really, in the second leg, where he obviously didn't manage to get a goal at Villa Park. But there's going to be plenty of games to play this season. There's going to be plenty of time for Ollie Watkins to score goals. And he's had all this time off, and we know Ollie Watkins can score goals, so I'm not worried about it. And I'm backing him to break his duck in this game, mate. I'm going to go for a 1-0 win.
I like it. I will go 2-0. Ollie's a streaky player. Always has been. Always has been. He's either red hot or ice cold, and really there's very little in between. I did think the Hibs hat-trick was going to be the start of a run of form, and I thought particularly with that Burnley game where we looked free-flowing, I thought that that was a good opportunity for him to get on the score sheet and kind of continue that form. But it's interesting that it's very competition specific. So Ollie Watkins' form in the Europa Conference League is going to be totally isolated from his form in the Premier League, it seems, which is going to make him very hard to judge this season and very annoying, I imagine, for FPL managers who continue to stick with him like yourself, mate. But no, I will go 2-0. I think we'll get it done. I don't think it'll be easy. We've got a slight set piece problem, which is kind of coming onto the radar a little bit, I think. Obviously, we conceded 2 goals from set pieces against Liverpool. Since Emery's first game as Villa boss, this is quite an interesting stat to end on, food for thought perhaps. Only Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest, both on 13, have conceded more goals from set pieces, excluding penalties, than Aston Villa's 11. And you kind of look at Anderson and Gahey and Lerma and Decore and Edouard and this very battling side that you mentioned, and how kind of teams will be looking to counter on against Villa and make use of their set pieces. That is just something to have one eye on, especially as we've just been watching Austin McPhee take up his part-time role with Scotland as well. Probably he could probably do a getting back to Bodymore and watching some tape, to be honest.
You reckon it'll be him and McGinn on in an Uber back or what, or a plane? I guess Tommy Jordan will probably be there as well. He'll have been at the game. Get all the Scots, just haul them all back down.
Get on the iPad.
That's it. Yeah, you got some work to do, Aston. Got some work to do. I think enough time has sort of passed from that Liverpool game. I feel like people were so reactive, like that. Twitter, and I know Twitter doesn't account for everyone, but it was almost unbearable after the game because, listen, we were poor, but Liverpool are Liverpool and they don't have to be at their best to beat teams. And, even as we mentioned in the podcast, mate, if anyone other than Darwin Núñez on the end of like half of them crosses, it'd have been about 7-0. And God, imagine the meltdown then. So, enough time has passed, and as we've seen, many a time, when we've had these sort of heavy defeats, Emery is generally pretty good at recouping and taking the learnings from that and sort of really drilling the players. And, as we mentioned at the top, mate, with a lot of our players sort of not necessarily away, like Watkins and a couple of the English guys. Cons, obviously, Mings is out, but, he'd have been someone that Southgate actually did name drop in his press conference for being missing. But, having as many people back as we do, obviously with a nice healthy amount of people going and having what looks like a decent break, I'm sure we'll put everything to right that we saw in that Liverpool game. And hopefully, mate, we leave with 3 points, because now this is when the fixtures start to get really intense. This is where you see what Aston Villa and Unai Emery specifically are made of. And man, we've got some exciting games coming up, which will mean more content coming from Dan and I. I appreciate it's been a little while because of this break, but we will be here. We will be every step of the way. So just before this Zoom ends, I need to encourage you guys to subscribe if you haven't already. If you didn't know as well, we're on TikTok and Instagram. The links will be in the link tree, as will be a link to donate to Dan's 100 miles. Dan, quickly, we have a minute and a half left. How's it going?
It's going really, really well, mate. I actually wanted to talk about this because I had a mystery donor who anonymously donated £103 the other day, which I couldn't believe. And so whoever that is, if you're listening, because a few people have donated that listen to the podcast, if you are listening, I can't even put into words how amazing that is. But one by one, I'm going through family members, friends, trying to figure out who they are. So if you're out there and you're listening, I will find out who you are and I will thank you.
It's got Liam Neeson over here.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Guys, keep up the donations. If you haven't already, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and up the Villa.